them, you maybe found one that you really like and you can hang on to, and maybe you'll tell again, because these are some very, very powerful stories, although they're kind of hidden in the pages of the Bible. And here's something else about stories, too. I think we are all kind of geared to tell stories. I think we as people love stories and storytelling. And storytelling, a good storyteller is an art. If you've ever heard a really good storyteller, it's kind of fun to listen to one. I, for one, am terrible at storytelling. And I don't say that like, oh, poor, poor, pitiful me. It's an objective truth that I'm bad at stories because I've got written proof. I tried to find it the other day at home, but back when I was in high school, there was an article that came out in the paper, and the title of the headline of the article was, Portage High School Freshman, Indiana's Worst Writer. True story, I'm not making this up. This was the headline with my photo next to it. Now, it was the 80s, so I'm not too sure which was worse, the photo or the headline. But anyway, this was the headline. Now, my teacher, though, was really proud of me because what it was a contest that the local paper had put on, or actually the Indiana had put on, the state of Indiana had put on, and all of our students in our English class had to participate. Okay, this is like a freshman in high school, so all the English, or the freshmen had to participate. So what you had to do was, you had to make an opening paragraph to a story that was grammatically correct, but terrible. Okay, with me? So again, it had to be grammatically correct, but terrible. And I won. Okay, so I can't remember what exactly it said, but I know what it was, the gist of it was, and so I kind of, to the best I could, recreate it. It went something like this. It was a dark and stormy night, kind of cliche, right? When the butler shuffled into the conservatory with the candlestick, held it over his head, and shot Mr. Doe. Everyone called him John, who subsequently died of a knife wound. That's all, folks. So it was something along those lines, and that got me the title of Indiana's Worst Writer. There was no prize, and I became an engineer. True story. So again, like I said, coming from the worst writer in Indiana, there is an art to storytelling, and the Bible, by the way, does such a beautiful job of telling stories. And I love the way it uses stories to communicate these hard truths or biblical truths or stories about God. It's not just giving us information or a collection of laws or what you should do or not do, but it tells stories of people. And the storytellers actually make them very relatable to us and very personal and actually very memorable. And there's things that are in the stories themselves that add depth. We might miss them from time to time, but if we pick up on these little clues, these little nuggets, we'll actually have a deeper story because they're such good storytellers. And for today, our hidden figure is going to be parts of the story. Little hidden truths inside of the story and this art of storytelling in the Bible. So we're going to look at a story that most of you may know, actually, called Ruth, the story of Ruth. It's a book of the Bible, and it's set in the period of the Judges. Now, we've been kind of in and out of the book of Judges the last few weeks. We looked at Deborah and Jael. We looked at Gideon, all from the period of the Judges. But today we're not going to talk about the ups and downs of Jewish history or the religious politics or national politics of Israel. We're not going to get into that stuff. We're going to look at a family, a personal story about a family of Ruth. The story opens with a famine. So there's a famine in Israel at this time. Again, about the time of the Judges, there's a famine. And there's a man from Bethlehem named Eli Melech. And Eli Melech lived right around Bethlehem, so he's living here. And because of the famine, he decides to go over to Moab. Now, one of the nuggets in the story of Ruth is the names. Because the names have meaning. Now, I know all of you have names, and they mean something. Your parents gave you a name for some reason, probably, that either they like the name or is an uncle that you're named after or something like that. But these names in this story have real meaning. So, for example, if you look at Eli Melech, his name is broken in two pieces. Eli, that first part, means my God. Remember back from the New Testament, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, right? My God, why have you forsaken me? That means my God. This, Melech, is the word for king. So his name literally means, my God is the king, or my God is the king of my life. Right? So this is a very faithful guy based on his name. When he leaves home in Bethlehem to go to Moab to escape the famine, he takes with him his wife, whose name is Naomi. Her name means pleasant. So, my God is king takes pleasant with him when he goes to Moab. He has 2 sons, and their names are not as pleasant. One is named Machlon, which means sickness. The other kid is Chilon, which means spent or dying. I don't know why they picked those names. It probably wasn't high in the baby naming book back then. I mean, I can't imagine going up and, hi guys, these are my 2 kids. Meet them. This is valley fever and walking pneumonia. That little bundle of joy over here. He just kind of got this energy. I don't know if I would name my kids that. But anyway, my God is king and pleasant. Take their kids, valley fever and walking pneumonia, and they all go to Moab. When they get there, so again, they've gone across here. Now again, this is not part of Israel. Okay, these are foreign lands. So when they get there to escape the famine, they kind of settle in. And they do something that was not legal, if you will, for the Israelite people. Their sons, sick and dying, married 2 Moabite women, which again wasn't supposed to happen, but they did. And they married 2 women, one named Ruth and the other named Orpah. Now you're probably thinking, what's their names mean? That's to be continued. We're going to kind of, next week we'll talk about no, I'm not kidding. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but their names will come up here in a minute. Well, things don't go well in Moab. And within 10 years of living in Moab, a decade, all 3 husbands die. So my God is king, sickness, and dying, they all die, which is probably not a shock. Just saying. And that leaves Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah. By the way, I'm not saying Oprah wrong, it's Orpah. These 3 women as all widows. Now that's super difficult, not just because of the loss of a husband, the loss of someone you love. It's beyond that. In this culture, in this period, it was a financial disaster as well, because now they had no family to take care of them. Right? I mean, the provider of the household usually was male in these days, and that was gone. And so they're poor, and they're widows, and they're in at least Naomi's in a foreign country. Now back in Israel, there were systems set up to take care of widows and orphans. But there wasn't those things set up necessarily in Moab. In fact, God had a passion and a heart for the oppressed, the poor, the widow, and the orphan. And he called his people to take care of them. In Isaiah 58, there's a very famous passage where God is talking to the people about this. In verse 2 of that chapter, it says, "Yet day after day they seek me and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that practiced righteousness and did not forsake the ordinances of their God. They ask me for righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to me." What he's saying is they're faking it. They want to act like they love me. They want to act like they care about me, as if they cared, but they don't do what I tell them to do. And later on in the chapter, it's the people say back to God, why don't you hear us when we pray? Why don't you respond to our worship? Why don't you like the little fish sticker on my car? Why don't you respond to us? Where have you been? And God's like, as if you really cared. Because then he goes on in verse 6. He says, "Is this not the fast or the worship that I choose? To loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and to bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them?" He's saying, you guys think that worship is saying the right words and doing all that kind of stuff. He's like, it's not. Real worship, he says, is when you take care of each other the way I wanted you to, and you're not doing that. You're not doing the things I asked you to do in the first place, to take care of the oppressed and the hungry and the homeless and the widow and the orphan, like Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah. He said, you don't do those things. They're responding to God in a way that wasn't worship. Isaiah 1:17, God said to them, learn to do good, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, plead for the widow. This was built in the Israelite law and into their Israelite culture, was to care for those in need. And when the people didn't do it, God said, you're not worshiping. In fact, that became part of Christian culture at a very early time. It just kind of fell over into what we do as Christians. James 1:27 from the New Testament. He said, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this. So pure religion, he says, is a definition like this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. A relationship with God is defined by a relationship with others as well. We can't just separate the two out. They go together. When we love others, we are showing our love for God. When we show love for other people, especially the oppressed, especially those who are poor, the widow and the orphan, we are showing that we love God by loving them. And that identity, that culture, is the backdrop for the story of Ruth. So now we have these three widows all grieving together. Naomi, pleasant, has lost her husband and her two sons. And she hears that the famine in Bethlehem has eased up. And so she decides to go home, because she's got at least got some family back there in Bethlehem. It was a small town in those days, about 200 people. But she's going to go back to at least her country, where she may have some relatives still there. But what about the daughters-in-law? What about Ruth? Orpah? What about them? What are they going to do? Because their home is in Moab. That's where their family is. Their security is there. Their friends are there. Their help is all there in Moab. Well, as the story moves on, we see Naomi and her two daughters-in-law heading down the road to return to Bethlehem. But Naomi stops them and says, wait, stop. Don't go with me. Your family's here. Your security is here. Your help is here. Stay here. I'll go alone back to Bethlehem. And she kind of pushes him away. And that seems like the right thing to do. We can understand that. Like stay where you have the most security. Don't go with me. I'll go by myself. It's not your fault. I'll just go by myself. Orpah, one of the two daughters-in-law, turns around and decides to go home. She says, okay, I'll go back to my home in Moab. And her name, Orpah, means back of the neck. Why? Because that's the part she showed as she was walking away from Naomi. We can't really blame her. It makes sense that she would find security and help at home. So she turns around and goes back home. And even Naomi knows that's probably the right move. Ruth, however, doesn't do that. Ruth's name means friend. Friend. And that's exactly what Ruth is going to be to Naomi. We have this very beautiful passage in chapter 1 of Ruth, in this moment when Ruth decides to follow Naomi. And she says this: do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I'll be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and even more as well, if even death parts me from you. Beautiful passage of commitment, friendship. In fact, a lot of times you hear this read at a wedding. It appears in a wedding quite a bit, right? Husband and wife, where you go, I will go. Where you die, I will die. It's this commitment thing. However, which is fine, it's good for a wedding. However, we should be scripturally accurate when we use this passage in a wedding, don't you think? Right? If you're going to use this in a wedding, a piece of the Bible, then you should be scriptural accurate with this. Which means, when you get to this point in the service, the bride should turn to the mother-in-law, right? Because Ruth was the daughter-in-law of Naomi. The bride should turn to the mother-in-law and say, where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Nobody? No one's going to go for that? It's biblical. Yeah, me neither. Okay. Here's the thing. What you do have from Ruth is a definition of friendship. Because think about it, Ruth is in a very dangerous position. She's a widow too. She's going to go back with Naomi to a place, a foreign land, where she's not going to be as welcomed as she would be at home. She's going to a place, a land where it is forbidden to marry a foreigner. So her chances of getting married again are almost zero. Whereas if she'd stay in Moab, she'd have a chance to get married again. This is going to cause her real pain. She's going to lose her potential for financial support. She's going to leave her family. This is a tremendous step of faith. So why in the world would she do this? Why would she follow Naomi? Because she's going to live up to her name, friend. Too often today, we kind of have downplayed the meaning of friendship. Friendship today is too often just a thumbs up on Facebook. And it's so much more than that. At least in the Bible it is. It's this deep commitment to each other, being committed to seeking the good of the other person above yourself. When you're in a relationship, for not what you get out of it, but what you can give to it. And that's the kind of person that Ruth was for Naomi. She was a biblical friend, just as her name implies. Well, they returned together to Bethlehem. And when she gets there, Naomi is still pretty hurt. And she changes her name from Naomi to Mara, which means bitter. She goes from being called pleasant, no, you call me Mara, you call me bitter. Because she believed God is punishing her. That this life has just gone out all wrong for her. Her husband's dead, her boys are dead, and she just is going to be defined by this loss. That's something for us, too, we have to be careful of. Letting our losses and our bitterness define who we are. There's a book, A Grace Disguised, How the Soul Grows Through Loss, by Gerald Sitzer. In this book, he talks about a moment in his life, a chapter he calls it, where he was hit by tremendous loss on a road in Idaho. On this road one night, there was a car accident. In the accident, he lost his mother, his wife, and his daughter. 3 generations all in the same accident. He said this was a loss that was just unspeakable. He wrote, "My story is part of a much larger story that I did not choose. I was assigned a role for which I did not audition." It's like, I didn't want this. I didn't sign up for this. But he's not going to let it define him, he said. See, Naomi is letting her situation define who she is, even to her name, right? Call me bitter. What Sitzer says is our real story is not what happens to us, but how we respond to it. That's our story. How will I let loss define me, or how will I overcome that part of my story? Will I change my name to bitter? Or will I keep my name pleasant? Well, like Sitzer, we may not audition for the role we have right now in our life, but we can determine how our story is told. He went on to write this, as the storyteller of his own story. I have the sense that the story God has begun to write, he will finish. And that story will be good. The accident remains now, as it always has been, a horrible experience that did great damage to us and to so many others. It was and will remain a very bad chapter. But the whole of my life is becoming what appears to be a very good book. Because he's letting God help write that story. See, we are the storytellers of our story. How are you going to determine to tell your story? How will you let loss define you, or how will you define loss? Well, there's a larger story, Sitzer says, that God has written. A larger story for Naomi. A larger story for you and me. Well, when they get to Bethlehem, Naomi and Ruth, they still have no money, no really place to go. But Ruth is determined to take care of them, right? She's not going to wallow in it. She's going to be a friend. And she goes to a field where she begins to glean. Now, what is gleaning? Well, again, we said that God had this system set up to take care of the poor and the oppressed and the widow and the orphan. And so he told farmers that when you're out farming, leave the edges of your field so that the poor can get that food. They can come and get it. Or if you drop something when you're harvesting, let it drop. Just don't pick it up. Let someone else come and get it. So in a sense, you are providing for other people as you are doing your harvesting. In Deuteronomy 24, here's the command. When you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back and get it. It shall be left for the alien, the orphan, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all your undertakings. So, okay, I want you, leave something for other people. At the same time, the poor and the oppressed had to go work to get it. It wasn't just given to them. They had to go into the field and pick up that extra stuff or harvest edges of the field. But it was a system set up to help each other and also give some sense of pride and ownership to those who were poor. They worked for what they got. And that's how the system was set up. Well, Ruth works hard. She goes in these fields, starts working, man, all day, nonstop, just gleaning and picking up what she can and getting stuff. And people start to notice. Here's this widow in the fields, working all day, working harder than we are to take care of herself and her mother-in-law. And then it says in the Bible, it happened. Well, I don't think it was a coincidence. I think God was helping write Ruth and Naomi's story. But the field she's working in happens to belong to a man named Boaz, a rich man who is also a relative of Elimelech, right? My God is king. You're probably wondering, what does Boaz's name mean? His name means, in him is strength. In him is strength. That's what Boaz's names mean. Well, he sees Ruth working hard, never resting, and he kind of says, this is really impressive. And so he says to the people around him, look, don't bother her. Drop extra food. If you're walking along, just drop some extra stuff so she can pick it up. He gives her some food. He invites her to eat with his reapers, the guys who are picking up the grain, the reapers. He says to her, don't fear the reapers. That's where the song came from. Just kidding. All right, but he says, look, you'll be safe here. Don't go to someone else's field where they can get after you or hurt you. Don't do that. Stay here. I'll give you food. I'll give you water. I'll give you some grain to take back to Naomi. Just stay here. You're a hard worker. Just stay here and we'll take care of you. Why? Because in him is strength. Just like his name. He does the right thing. He keeps the commands of God. He goes beyond the law to do the right thing. In fact, at this time, we believe that not many farmers were doing this. They're taking everything for themselves and weren't following the gleaning and the harvesting laws. But he was. Well, Ruth gets home and tells a story to Naomi. It's like, man, this guy named Boaz, he does great stuff for us. He's super nice. He's fantastic. She said, wait, Boaz? I know that name. In fact, he's related to us. And what she does then is she gets Ruth all fixed up, makeup and hair all done and all that kind of stuff, and sends her back to Boaz, who's been sleeping at the threshing floor. He's kind of protecting his crops and stuff and working all night, and she goes to see Boaz. And when she goes, guess what happens? He proposes to her to get married. That's like a super quick proposal, right? I mean, like days maybe that they're getting married. I don't know what the official record is for the fastest proposal. I don't know if you know this, but Stacy and I have a pretty quick one too. We met in October of my senior year, Stacy and I did. And about 4 or 5 weeks later, she was over at our apartment and we're doing homework together, and I see her sitting there in her chair, all pretty and beautiful and whatnot. And I said, you know what? We get along really well, and we should just get married. I dare you. I'm like kind of kidding, but kind of serious, because I really was like, want to marry her. And she goes, okay. So I'm like, okay. So I call the next day. I call and say, hey, what's going on? Not much. So, we still getting married? She's like, yeah, you said so. Okay. Well, it's 28 years later, and neither of us have blinked since. But we got married. And, I know you're thinking, what a romantic guy. Stacy is so lucky. Well, here's the thing. For Ruth, this is more than a marriage proposal, much more than that. In fact, what Ruth does is call Boaz not just to marry her, but to redeem the entire family. She's like, you're related to Naomi. And if you marry me, you get to redeem the entire family. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that Boaz gets all the property of Elimelech, right? He gets all that. But he also gets to take care of Ruth and Naomi in the family. Now, this is part of God's plan to keep families together. That if there was a tragedy in a family, a relative could redeem that part of the family to keep it taken care of, to take care of the relatives and the property and all that kind of stuff. However, many Israelites didn't follow that practice. Why? Because that means that if I redeem that part of the family, I get that financial burden. Their kids get part of my inheritance. It could have been not good for me financially to bring on all this problem. So they'd say, you know what? It's not worth it. Just keep it over there. But Boaz, his name means in him is strength. He said that this is more important. And so what he does is he goes to the city gate. Now, the city gate was kind of like the city hall of the day where you had business dealings take place. And they come to find out there was one person standing between Boaz and marrying Ruth. One person standing between Boaz and redeeming the family. One person that's keeping Boaz from being ruthless. Yeah, sorry. So Boaz goes to the city gate, and he goes to this one relative who's closer, okay, one closer relative, and he says to this person, hey, look, you're the next redeemer. You get to have the land of Elimelech if you want it. And the guy's like, sweet, that's awesome. I'll take that. He's like, but along with that, you get Ruth, who's a foreigner from Moab. You get her, and then all the kids you have with her will be part of your inheritance. And also, there's a mother-in-law involved, and she's like, people like to call her bitter. And I'm sure you'll love her. She's just great. And the guy's like, I'll pass. And so he says, nope, tell you what, you can have it. He says, it'll mess up my inheritance, it'll mess up my finances. You can take it. And Boaz does. And he redeems the family, brings Naomi and Ruth into his own household and takes care of them. It's a beautiful story, and it all begins really because Ruth was a true friend, a biblical friend to Naomi. Now you may wonder, why would Boaz do this? I mean, yes, he's a strong guy, he's a courageous guy, but why would he have this heart for Ruth? Well, first off, go back and take a look in the genealogy of Jesus, Matthew 1. And Salmon, the father of Boaz, by Rahab, and Boaz, the father of Obed, by Ruth, and Obed, the father of Jesse. So there's our Ruth and Boaz. But who is Boaz's mom? Rahab. Who's Rahab? The prostitute of Jericho. The prostitute of Jericho. So she's the one who helps Joshua get into the land, right? But she was an outsider and a prostitute. That's his mom. So Boaz knew something about being an outsider. And he is righteous, not because of his birthright. He is righteous because of his actions. Like Ruth, she's an outsider too. Both these two outsiders, these two foreigners to Israelite culture, do the right thing, the righteous thing. They stand out above the crowd because they did what was right. They did it again and again and again. Well, Ruth has a son, which we see here, and her great-great-grandson is King David. And David is an ancestor of Jesus. If you think about it, there's a reason why Mary and Joseph go to Bethlehem for the census. Why? That's where their family is from. That's where Ruth and Boaz are from. So when you sing, O Little Town of Bethlehem, home of Ruth and Boaz, right? That name means something now. There's a whole story there of faithfulness and friendship and courage and strength in the little town of Bethlehem that took a family all the way to the greatest Redeemer of history. In fact, Jesus will take on that role of Boaz as Redeemer. Look at John 14. In my Father's house, he says, there are many dwelling places, many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. That's a Redeemer. He brings you and me into his family. He redeems us into his family, just like Boaz did with Ruth, and like Ruth did with Naomi. He redeems us. See, Ruth is a story of redemption. A story of a woman who was a friend, a loyal and compassionate friend, who redeemed her mother-in-law from bitterness, who worked hard when it was unfair. In fact, we sang a song just a little bit ago before the message. In the lyrics it says, I am with you, me and you. Where you go, I'll go too. I'm with you until your heart finds home. That's what Ruth was, helping her mother-in-law find a home. It was a story of a man, Boaz, an outsider himself, yet committed himself to God, who was strong, faithful, trusted, and courageous, and did the right thing even when it hurt. It's a story of our family too, because their family brings to the earth the greatest Redeemer of all time, Jesus, who redeems us. You know what his name means? Well, his name is actually Yeshua in Hebrew, which means to rescue or to deliver. To rescue, deliver, and redeem. That was his mission, and to make you and I part of his family. We're going to close our worship today with a song, and it's one of my favorite songs right now. And it has some incredibly powerful lyrics that kind of capture what's going on here in the story of Ruth. The song says, as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Where you lost your life, so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you, so will I. I can see your heart in everything you've done, every part designed in a work of art called love. If you gladly choose surrender, so will I. I can see your heart, 8 billion different ways, every precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love them, so will I. Like you would again, 100 billion times. What measure could amount to your desire? You're the one who never leaves the one behind. Let's pray.